Good morning, afternoon, or evening, everyone, depending on where you are. I know we have about people from around 20 different countries on the webinar today, which is fantastic. I hope you're well and healthy and hanging in there. Let's crack on with today's fantastic webinar. My name is Sergio Lara Bercial, and I'm delighted to be your host for today's iCoachKids Shares Live webinar. This is already our ninth event, okay? We've done 9 of these. Thank you for making the time to join us, especially today. I don't know where you are, but here in the UK, it's extremely hot and it's nice to be outside. Today, we're going to explore a much needed topic, climate change in youth sport, with two thought leaders in this area, Professor Nicolette Schipper van Beldoven and Professor Sophia Jowett. Nicolette and Sophia are two of my academic idols, so I'm super excited to have them on the webinar today. I'm a little bit of a starstruck, so bear with me. Before we get going, though, I want you to be aware of the what we call the family rules. Really, what we try to do to make sure that everyone has the best experience during the webinar. Like I said before, please keep your camera and your microphone off. Also, please feel free to, throughout the webinar, submit questions for the speakers on the chat box, either on YouTube or on the Zoom chat box, and we will get to as many of those as we can. Feel free to post things on social media. In fact, we want to encourage you to spread the message because people then can watch the recording on YouTube at a later time when it suits them. And very importantly, please comment, have arguments on the chat box, but let's be respectful to each other. Let's make sure that we're just here to share and learn. We don't have to agree on anything. It's just an opportunity to share, okay? Let me also explain how the webinar is going to run. We're going to start with some introductions, and then our speakers are going to present some ideas for roughly between 15 and 20 minutes each. Then I will start a conversation with them, and then we will open for question and answers from you, as I say, via the chat facility. Today's topic, climate change in youth sport, is perhaps the most important area to consider as a coach or as a club. At a time when children and young people are dropping out of sport at an alarming rate, making sure we get the, as Nicolette puts it, pedagogical climate right is key to keeping them in the system. And in the times of COVID-19, this could be even more important. I'm going to introduce Nicolette first. Professor Nicolette Schipper van Beldoven is Professor of Sport Pedagogy at Windesheim University of Applied Sciences in the Netherlands. She works both in academia and industry because she's also a program manager for the Netherlands Olympic Committee and Sport Confederation. Nicolette has extensive experience in coaching, teaching physical education, applied research, and translating science into practice. She's published extensively in many areas, including transgressive behavior, sexual harassment, sport for children with special needs, and pedagogical perspectives in sport. Last but not least, Nicolette is one of the Dutch representatives from the iCoachKids Management Group and an amazing contributor to the global movement. Without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Nicolette. Please welcome Professor Nicolette Schipper van Beldoven. All right, Nicolette, you're on. I think you might have to, there you go. Yeah, and I'm going to stop
I
sharing.
have muted myself.
Nicolette, thank you so much for making time today. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the webinar. I'm not going to take any more time of you. I'm going to stop sharing and share your presentation. So there we are. Okay, we're going to have to go back on that one a little bit. There you are. And I need to give you, we're trying something really technical today. We're actually giving Nicolette control of my keyboard of my computer. So there you go. Don't hack my Amazon account, okay, Nicolette? Thank you.
I hope it works. Yes.
You should be able
there
to do
it
it
is.
now.
Yeah. I hope it will work. Thank you, Sergio, for introducing me and for welcoming to this webinar. I'm very pleased to be here, and I'm happy to get you involved in the pedagogical sport climate because it's very needed that we change the climate in which we arrange our youth sport area. And I will explain you why, what the solution is, and I give you a practical handout, and that all in 15 minutes. Remote, komt die weer terug? Okay. It doesn't work.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, I have it. I hope so. Yes. Well, first we have in youth sport two problems we have to consider. First is that we see that in all youth, the decrease of motor skills is a very big problem. Years ago, we had a very more better motor skills, and now it's shifting to the bad part. So we have to pay attention to the motor development of youth, and especially also in youth sports, because otherwise we get a motivational problem or a talented problem. So we have to motivate them to be active and be also be pleasant in active because of their motor skills. The second problem is even a worse problem. I'm not sure it's working. Oh, yeah, there it is. It doesn't. Yeah, there it is. The other problem is a large problem within youth sport. It's the experience of a negative behavior within sport. So we have a very big problem in transgressive behavior in sport. We did a very large research within the Netherlands and in the Belgium, the Flanders part of Belgium, and looked at emotional abuse, physical abuse, and sexual abuse. And if you look at the numbers, they are very big numbers. And then it's only the red and the black part, you see that we have 26% emotional abuse, 10% of physical abuse, and 13% of sexual abuse. So 1 out of 10 children has an experience of sexual abuse. And we all know the big problems in 2017 with the soccer players that came out and say they were sexually abused. So it's in all kinds of sports. It's not only soccer. We see it in gymnastics with all kinds of preparators. It can be the art, but also the coach. But also a big problem within these experiences are the peers. So the peers, so the group mates of children can be also the perpetrators of negative experience. That's a thing to know for coaches, because you have to be alert for these experiences. And you see it's a big problem. And then you see that the fun in sport is under pressure. And fun of sports is one of the most motivated factors for children to do sports. So you have to work on the fun part of sports also to diminish the transgressive behavior part.
No. I'll do it.
Yeah, you do it. Yeah. So the answer to solve these problems is, in one hand, because to gain the profits of sport, so it can be social or it can be fair play. You also have to do something for that. Sport in itself is not social. And to diminish the negative parts, the same key lies within the context you create for the children. And that's the development of the child. So the context should fit the development of the child. And that's where also sports pedagogy is all about. So the sport needs a pedagogical sport climate so it can fit with the child, so he can develop in the good way, get better motor skills, and have fun in sports. Next slide. So how do we define a pedagogical sport climate? Mostly it's not a concept that everybody knows. So we looked at in science, did a very big literature study. Click, Sergio. But there is not one definition that is used by all, and that is in the word of pedagogy, because pedagogy also has stands for didactics, but stands for education. And we look at pedagogy more in the child development sense of the word. So we, next slide. We did a big research, also brought a book about it, and we called the pedagogical climate, next slide, a positive, safe learning climate in which we help young people develop in and through sports, which theoretically can be divided into 4 pillars. And we call that You can give the next slide. The pedagogical compass. It doesn't work, I think, yeah. And that's where we look through the eyes of the children towards sport and see what they need in sport and through sport to develop themselves holistically. So it's about creating the right climate, the good context, so children grow up in and through sports and mean towards their development. And it's theoretically divided because in behavior, in practice, it all mix up. You cannot say I be safe or I be caring, it will mix up. But it gives you a handout how to think or how to arrange your thoughts so you can act towards the four components of the compass to create the right climate. Next slide. So the four pillars are, of course, the, can you give me the next one? Development-oriented climate, the motivational climate, the caring climate, and the socially safe climate. So these are the four components you have to think about to create the right context for the children. Next, please. It's about what? So the development-oriented climate is about how do you arrange your sport? How do you guide your sport? So how do you create the motivational climate? How do you keep your children safe? So how do you behave respectfully and show interest in the individual, in the caring climate? So you have to care about children. You have to keep them safe if you want to create the right climate. If you look at those four parts, you can see a left part and a right part, an upper part and an under part. Next slide, please. And you can see that the blue part is more the didactical part in teaching or in coaching. The under part, the green part, is about relationship, how to create good relationship. If you look at the left part of the compass, you see it's all about being a child. Do you understand the child? What does the child need? And you have to show interest in this child. And the right part is how to create the best learning environment. And feeling safe is one of the main parts in which learning can happen. If a child doesn't feel safe, he will not learn. His neurons in his head will block and you have not a learning climate. So safety and caring is one of the backbones of creating a pedagogical compass. And it creates the right context for youth sport. And next slide, please. It will fit in. Yes. So in the development-oriented climate, you look specifically how a child develops, not only motorically, but also socially, psychologically, emotionally, and have to see what fits the children. And for children who are in need, that means something else than for the normal children. So you have to look at children, what do they need and how do you build your programs? Next slide. In the motivational climate, it's all about positive coaching, not the negative coaching, what we saw years ago, that we say we have to do a die hard and you have to be challenging. And so that it's about creating the more process-oriented feedback and not on winning. So if you say you have to win, 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 then you don't create a positive climate. It's all about the process to gain, to be your better self. If you look at the caring climate, yes, next slide. It's all about how are you as a coach, how do you see yourselves in this relationship with children? So look into the mirror and look at yourself and think, what kind of coach I am? Have I interest in children? If you want to teach or coach children at the age of 15, you have to know all about puberty because that's a very difficult age. And if you don't like puberty, you shouldn't be a coach for 15-year-olds because they want to discuss with you. They want to charge your authority because that's in their development. So you need to be of interest in the group you are coaching. And the safe part is, of course, being safe, being respectful, being integrated. And within our numbers, we saw that group dynamics is a very big part to look at. So you have to see how the group as a whole acts within your team, and not only the individual, but also how they communicate socially, not only as a team in winning the game, but also how do they act towards each other. It's a very big part. Next slide. So the pedagogical compass is all about looking at children and see that you do the right things. Next, please. And it's all about, in the heart of the pedagogical compass, it's about child-centered coaching. So it's not about sport-centered coaching, what's best for sport. It's what's best for children. So it's about creating how they become autonomous, to treat them holistically, see them as the whole child. So it is child-centered, is the backbone of a pedagogical compass. Next slide, please. So if you look at the 4 parts, then the thing you need to take home is, as in the part where being a child and didactics come together, you have to know your profession. It's sport as a starting point. Sport is your teaching method. It's the interaction with the individual, with the sport environment. So how do you create the right sport environment in the what? So know your profession, know how to build programs, know how to see how to guide talent towards the way up. In the right part, to the learning part, you see it's all about mindset. It's in your attitude. It's about how do you see your coaching style. You have to have an inviting attitude. Set your good example. You need knowledge about different coaching methods. So it's it will ask something about you, from you as a coach. It's about your mindset. Be a positive coach. You have to trigger yourself, be a positive coach. It's not about pampering. It's not, you cannot say it's not good what you are doing, but you guide that differently. And if you see at the relation part, it's all about how do you treat your athletes as a person. So know your athletes, know what they are all about. Sometimes an exercise will not work because the child has a quarrel with his friends. And this he takes to the exercise, and then you think, oh, but I have organized all well, why doesn't fit? Because it's in the relationship part. So always stay calm. Calm is very, if you are an adult and you guide children, always stay calm. And with children, always parents will be there. They are always involved. So involve parents. Go also talk to the parents and keep them towards you. And in the ethical part and the integrity part, it's also have to be a safe coach. Your coaching style that entails confidence and safety. It starts with you. You have to create that they come to you no matter what, and you will help them no matter what. So if you ask me what's a good coach, I always say it starts with the green part. Children will always say a good coach is the one that has all. So you have the blue part and the green part. The next best coach is the one that has the green part, and then the didactic part, so the blue part, and the coach that's not good has nothing of this. So if you want to start to create a pedagogical compass, you have to look at yourself, look in the mirror and see what do you do at the relational part. Now, Sophia will tell you all about it because this is her expertise, how to create a good relationship. And of course you will ask, because this is within the iCoachKids project. Next slide, please. We also have the pledge. You see, we have 10 golden rules, and also the 10 golden rules fits perfectly within the compass. So it gives you a guidance for your thoughts. It's about that you can organize your thoughts. Do I do the right things? And it's then easier to see, Did I do the right things in the development part? Did I plan my programs? Did I work on foundational skills? In the motivational part, did I prioritize love of sports above learning? Did I use different methods to guide the children? So it gives you a handout how to think. We don't have all the answers. So how do you act? Because you need a large toolkit to be a great or good coach. And but it gives you that you need to address all 4 parts of this compass. So it's not only one part, so be a motivational coach, because it's also about caring. I talked to a coach and they said, but I'm very good in didactics. I say, that's okay, that's good, because then you have the upper part of the compass, but you also have to realize that you have to be a safe coach and a caring coach, that you ask, how is it, how are you doing? What are your thoughts? So it gives you a handout. I hope it gives you a handout in your own thinking to work at a good context to create the good learning environment for children in which they stay safe and they learn a lot about sports and especially have fun in sports. So my last slide gives you some questions. So in your coaching, and you're coaching in a pedagogical perspective, you have to ask yourself, do I know the young people I coach? Do I know what moves them? Are my directions age appropriate? So if you give a direction towards a technique, do you know if the child will understand this direction? Is it age appropriate? Because for 5-year-olds, it's different than for 15-year-olds. Is my exercise material built up? Is it age appropriate? Did you guide them towards their next level? Is my focus on fun and learning and not on winning? Coach, I process oriented. So also again, not on the results, but on the process in gaining better and better. Do I control the players or strengthening their empowerment? So it's all about empowerment, the youth. Do I give too much feedback? Do I ask too few questions? So how do you do that? And do I provide social security? One of the main parts is provide social security. Be safe. So this was in short my presentation in a slide, and hope you have understand a bit of the compass. Can I explain it to you largely, but in an overview, it's about thinking and rethinking how you are coaching in favor of the children, so in the child's best interest. Next slide. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicolette, and lots of really interesting questions coming through. That's done a fantastic job in setting the scene. It's a tremendous framework, really, that every coach can benefit from. And I will ask you some more questions about that later. But he's done a fantastic job also in teeing up Sophia and what Sophia is going to speak about. So I'm going to hand over to Sophia. Sophia, if you want to start sharing your presentation, please go ahead. But let me first, while you do that, let me introduce you. So another one of my my heroes. Okay. Where are we? There we are. Okay. So, okay, let's move on to our next speaker. Sophia Jawed is Professor of Psychology at Loughborough University in the UK. Amongst other topics, Sophia's research examines the content and functions of the coach-athlete relationship and the important role these relationships play within the context of coaching and sport more broadly. The findings of her research have been published in a range of scientific journals, book chapters, and conference presentations nationally and internationally. This research, Sophia's work, has informed coach development and, most importantly, coaching practice, including mine, across the world. Please welcome Professor Sophia Jawed. Sophia, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Sergio, for the kind invitation and for your kind words. Thank you very much. It is a pleasure to be here with the listeners, with everyone today. As you said, such a beautiful day out there. It is some people are hugely committed to the cause to be here with us today. So thank you to all the listeners. So without any further ado, and following the presentation of Nicolette, I would like to say that Sergio gave me the title Climate Change in Youth Sport. And once I had that title, I scratched my head several times thinking, oh gosh, what change can I capture in 20 minutes? And of course, it would have been within coaching, as this is my area of research and work. And I'm glad to say that changes have happened within coaching over the years. And these changes have been very positive for coaching. And for our athletes, young or old. I will talk about one specific change that I have witnessed over the years. And I would like to talk about some notions initially that are very common in our practices and in our conversations with our colleagues within coaching. So you won't be surprised if I said that I'm just trying to change the slide. I don't seem to be able to. Oh, there it is. Sorry, it must take some time. There is some delay probably in the system. Coaching has changed, and it is much different from what it was 10, 20, 30 years ago. And we have seen a shift from being coach-centered to being more athlete-centered. And what I'm keen to talk about is later on about a combined approach to coaching that I have recently started referring to it as the coach-athlete-centered approach to coaching. I know that we all know these concepts, but I'd like very briefly to describe them so that we are all on the same wavelength in terms of what these concepts refer to and mean. So coach-centered approach to coaching is an approach that we have the coach as the focus, and the coach is at the heart, at the center of coaching. Here, what we expect is that the coach imparts, transmits knowledge, skills to athletes. And what we also see in this approach is that the coach leads, commands, orders, controls and directs his or her athletes. Therefore, there is very little choice that the athletes have. And as a result, the athletes are very passive in this type of coaching. Of course, this was very typical coaching 30, 40 years ago. When I was an athlete, for sure, I don't think my coaches ever asked me how I wanted to be coached, what were my dreams and aspirations, what were my goals. It was very much coach-driven. We see a shift now from coach to athlete, and we purport that the athlete-centered approach is a good approach, because in this approach, the athlete is the focus and the athlete is at the center of coaching. Athletes direct their own learning. Athletes ask questions and coaches ask questions to their athletes. Athletes execute activities, drills independently and in association with fellow athletes or teammates. So here we see a diametrically opposite, where now the athlete has got a lot of choice first and foremost, and he or she is very active in the coaching process. Before I go to this combined coach-athlete-centered approach that I have started talking about in the recent year or two, let me share with you some further thoughts about the coach and athlete-centered approaches. As I highlighted or hinted a little earlier, these approaches sit at the separate ends of a continuum, at the opposite ends. And as a coach, you either apply a coach-centered approach or an athlete-centered approach. Now, it has been argued in the literature that an overemphasis on either the coach or the athlete leads to rigidity and hampers flexibility. And we all know as coaches that flexibility, agility, adaptability are important ingredients of coaching, of the coaching environment. So if we just focus on the coach or on the athlete, we may miss the broader picture of the development and growth of the people that we work with. So if, for example, focus on the athlete and their needs, we may neglect other much broader aspects of their development. In addition to that, I would also like to highlight that an athlete-centered approach, in my eyes, and through my experience and research work, it will appear that neglects the coach's role, with an emphasis on the athlete and a huge shift from coach to the athlete. There is an obvious to me anyway, play down of the coach's role. Coaches are an authority figure. And as an authority figure, they have knowledge, they have the capacity and the skills and the competencies to guide, instruct, influence, and lead their athletes. And all of this, I feel, is lost within the athlete-centered approach. And I believe that coaches, as much as they are athletes, have an important role to play and needs to be acknowledged and valued. In addition, like in the coach-centered approach, the athlete-centered approach doesn't acknowledge the important role of the relationship that these people develop and maintain over the course of their sporting journey. The athlete-centered approach, in my eyes, doesn't provide a basis for togetherness. It doesn't provide a basis for togetherness and connection between the coach and the athlete. There is an absence of good quality, solid, meaningful relationships between young athletes and adult coaches, or indeed any athlete and coach at whatever level they may operate within the athlete-centered coaching approach, as it doesn't exist within the coach-centered approach. So this brings me to maybe suggesting and proposing to you this combined coach-athlete-centered approach to coaching, whereby the relationship is at the heart of it. This approach values both individuals, both the coach and the athlete, and their joint contributions are taken into account. The combined approach embraces the give and take that exists within the coach and the athlete partnership. This reciprocity, this give and take, the reciprocity and bidirectionality that exists between coaches and athletes is key to genuine, authentic connections and form the basis for their growth, development, and progress within sport. So, from coach-centered to athlete-centered, to what I propose a coach-athlete-centered approach to coaching. So I invite you to reflect and think whether this approach is something that you could employ and apply. This approach focuses on the athlete and coach joint contributions and underlines that coaching is an interpersonal affair where neither the coach nor the athlete can do it alone. They need one another for maximal effect. At the heart of coaching lies the combined interrelating between the coach and the athlete. What goes on between the coach and the athlete is very important for effective and successful coaching. And therefore, the quality of the relationship between these two people is paramount. And of course, it's not something that I have advocated for so many years within sport as a researcher and academic. My colleague Sergio and his colleague Cliff Mallet in Australia have highlighted the importance of relationships between coaches and athletes, perhaps at the highest level of sport, but equally in youth sport, I believe, is valid and important. And if you don't take it from academics, then please take it from some high-profile coaches and athletes who have very publicly and honestly talked about their relationships and the central aspect that they have played to their success in sport and personal satisfaction at the same time. So if relationships are important and you're happy with that element, then what does a good quality coach-athlete relationship look like? Now, admittedly, relationships are rather fluid, elusive, difficult to capture. Can we provide a systematic, tangible way to capture such a phenomenon, which is important for coaching and sport? Well, over the years, and since actually 1997, when I was a PhD student at the University of Exeter, and since then until now, we tried to capture thousands of coaches and athletes' thoughts, opinions about what that relationship is about. And using their perspectives and thinking and articulation, we have come up with a model that simplifies a very complex phenomenon. And this one I would like to present to you today. This model captures the quality of the coach-athlete relationship using four simple constructs: closeness, commitment, complementarity, and co-orientation. So let me very, very briefly describe these constructs in turn. Closeness refers to the tone, the affective tone of the relationship, and the bond, the affective bond that the coach and the athlete develop and maintain over time. And there are four relational properties that are key for closeness: trust, respect, appreciation, and liking for one athletes or with your coaches. Then ask yourself, how much trust is there? How much respect? Do I respect my athlete? Does my athlete respect me? And so on and so forth. So these are important questions to ask if you want to gain an insight into closeness. Then we've got commitment. Commitment reflects coaches and athletes' thoughts, intentions, willingness, motivation to maintain a close relationship over time. And commitment is very important, and research has actually highlighted that, because commitment is the glue between the coach and the athlete, especially when coaches and athletes undergo difficult times, tough times. So when there is poor performance, burnout, injury, deselection, if commitment is strong, then the likelihood of the coach and the athlete to maintain together is much more likely. And we want coaches and athletes to maintain relationships, because success and performance development don't happen over time. It takes time. Then we move into complementarity. Complementarity captures coaches and athletes' cooperative acts of interaction. Complementarity is synonymous to cooperation. And Cooperation comes into being when you observe coaches and athletes being responsive to one another and to each other's effort, being receptive, being open to each other's views and thoughts and opinions, being friendly as opposed to being hostile, cold, or distant, and being at ease and comfortable in each other's presence. Also, complementarity or cooperation captures the roles that coaches and athletes assume in the coach-athlete relationship. And on the whole, coaches have very specific roles to undertake, and this is to lead, to instruct, to orchestrate, to influence their athletes. And on the other hand, athletes, on the whole, are expected to filter information in and out as they see fit, take advice, grasp and notice what coaches may be saying and doing. I usually refer to athletes' roles as being the makers and the doers. They are the guys, the athletes who execute. And finally, co-orientation. Co-orientation very simply captures the common ground that exists between the coach and the athlete. Knowledge is very important. Shared knowledge is even more important. How much do the coach and the athlete know one another? Knowing one another will help coaches and athletes understand one another and therefore show empathy in one another. And here it is, the 4 C's, as we call them, provide a measure, a tangible way of understanding our relationships with the people we work very closely. So to conclude, the quality of the coach-athlete relationship is a powerful vehicle that takes you from place A to place B, hopefully a better place. And you need good quality communication, frequent communication, to make that relationship move quite swiftly from place A to place B. Now, if communication is not up to scratch or is insufficient and inadequate, the journey will be much longer and not as pleasant. And you may never even reach the place B, that better place. So relationship and communication are essential for the creation of a positive relational climate that is both effective and successful. And if I may, I will finish with the Coach K's quote, which I really like. 2 is better than 1 if 2 can act as 1. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sophia. Thank you so much. If I may ask you to stop sharing your presentation,
yeah,
that would be great. Wow. A lot to go through there and really, really interesting ideas for both, really. I've read your papers, I've read your books, and I'm still taking notes like a 12-year-old, okay? Fantastic 2 presentations, really. There's a few questions on the chat, but I'm gonna get us going with a couple of observations and also questions, really. First observation, really something that you said there, Sophia, right at the end around coaching being a journey and how that journey is going to have ups and downs, and it is the quality of the relationships really that is going to allow us to go through that, really. You said you've talked to thousands of coaches. That idea of the journey, where does that come from? Is that just talk a little bit more about that journey? What do you mean by the journey?
Well, the journey, I suppose, is that coaches and athletes start working together from really nothing. They don't know one another. They clearly 2 people come with their own experiences, backgrounds, biases, and they end up only by accident working together. So it is a journey in that they have to learn about one another, what makes them tick, what doesn't make them tick, their likes, their preferences, their interests, and that help them move from, as I said, place A to other places that may be more productive and more effective. Unless, and from a journey point of view, I'm thinking in terms of development and progress and growth. The athletes and the coaches come together with the purpose to stay together for a little while. The athletes, younger or not, they are there because they want to learn, they want to develop. They want to enjoy, of course, the process of learning and development. And this goes down to both the coach and the athlete to make the journey a happy journey as well. So the journey is about developing together.
And that's an interesting one, really, because if we go back to actually the origin of the word coaching, as I may have explained before in this webinar, or I don't know, definitely in some of the iCoachKids conferences we've explained this. It is about the journey, really. Originally, the word coaching comes because we start referring to coaching because it's the coach, the courage that is taking someone from A to B, as you said. And I think that's, you know, having that realization of, oh, that's actually what I'm here to do as a coach. You know, that's the reality of being athlete-centered or athlete and coach-centered, as you put it, really. What do I need to do now to actually take this person from A to B as fast as possible? And in the safest, going back to Nicolette's climate now, in the safest possible way as well. So thanks, Sophia. I'm going to go over to Nicolette for a second. Nicolette, really, again, I've seen you present the compass a few times. I've got your book, although my Dutch is really poor, but it's signed by you, so I'm going to put it on eBay at some point. Okay. But really, your last slide really was asking coaches some questions around, you know, like self-assessment of how well are you doing really in this idea of the climate. And from your experience, your own personal experience as a coach and as a PE teacher, but also working with other coaches, I know you do a lot of work with in coach development. From the 4 elements of the compass, what are coaches struggling with the most in your opinion? Where do we go wrong most of the time? You are muted. There you go.
Well, I have to close the window first because we are building.
If I may say that, I think there was some research that came out the other day that apparently "you are muted" is one of the most said sentences in the last 3 months. Yeah. Officially.
I can imagine. Yeah. Well, if you look at coaches, then we did also a big research in voluntary coaches. Then they say we are doing pedagogical because we look at children. But if you observe them, they forget because it's not a willingness, but they don't know how to act in front of children. So they still are very top down, saying what the children have to do. So they not giving them any autonomy or saying into the practice. So if you say an athlete-centered coaching and you want them to be autonomous, then you have to have another style of coaching. And then you see that it's all about techniques. So they are doing the techniques. They want to have the order of the program in the right way, but they forget to think they are coaching children. So it's more to address them on it's a child you are coaching. It's not a grown person. So children are different from adults. So we still keep saying you have to do something else for children than you do for adults. And because in the Netherlands, we have a very big infrastructure on sport clubs and voluntary coaches, we need to address this point, especially because we have to give them other insights into the coaching. It's not about techniques, it is about children and how do you work with children.
So, and that's an interesting one because you said it very clearly that if we want to start somewhere, we have to start in the green area, in the relational area. You know, if we want to really build a compass, that's the way to go, right? Because from what you were saying, coaches are focusing too much on the technical and tactical. That's all we can think about. Is that what you were saying there? Yeah.
Yeah. And then we say you can start with the green parts. Just be nice to children. Pay attention to children.
Make sure they come back.
Are part of it. Yeah. And so you can start today. You can start in a minute to be nice to children and not see them as an instrument for your coaching career, but that you want to help them develop. And that's something else than bringing basketball to them, but you want to help them develop. And that's a change in looking at sports. So we are in the middle of this process, also in a cultural change within the Netherlands, to create a different angle towards the youth sport area. So that's more pedagogical oriented, including the safe sport climate, because we lose a lot of children within organized sports, especially at the age of puberty, so at 14, 15 years, because then children don't want to listen to the coach anymore, or they want to play sports with their peers, but then they are selected in another team. So if you look at from the eyes of the children, what do they need so they can stay into sports, you do different things.
Fantastic, fantastic. And okay, I'm gonna start taking questions from the chat, because I want to make sure that the guys that have been listening have a chance really. So there was a question. The first question came from Mateus, and it's for both really, right? But it's the idea of how do we encourage children to be more to be agents in the sport experience, in the sense of taking control of what they can do. How, for example, in your case, the question for you, Nicolette, might be, how do we make children aware of the compass and the elements of the compass? Is there anything they can do? Do they need to have their own compass, for example, in terms of how they behave in the sport environment? So I'll start with you, and then I'll send the question over to Sophia in terms of the relationship. But have you ever experienced or explored this idea of children using the compass themselves?
Not yet, because we just started last year with introducing the compass. And what you see is that coaching is a social process. And if you look at children, they will follow the coach. So being a role model is one of the biggest parts in being a child for a youth. So if you do what you need to do and you are following the compass, children will follow you too, in an implicit way. So, but they learn about respect, they learn about how to deal with other children, they learn how to react to each other, because you give the right example. So as a coach, you have to be very clear that you are always educating children. If you don't want to, if you don't have the attention on it, you will do it because you're in the area of children and they will follow your role model. So if you are the right role model, they will follow. And then you can help them, because if they are aging and you can explain more things, then you can explain why you do the things and give them more autonomy in the choices. So you can help them in their empowerment to become more and more their own owner of the performance. But you have to give them that authority. So you have to trust them in this process. This trust in growth, trust in process-oriented task is one of the things the coach must do towards children. Because with trust, they grow.
And in that trust, we need to be patient, because they're not going to get it right first time. And I think a lot of the times where we get it wrong is that we give them a little bit of trust, they get it wrong, and we come down on them like a ton of bricks. And at that point, it's over. Okay, but we're not.
And especially the children that we don't like, or the children that have this aggressive behavior within your team, you think, well, we drop them out. But they are the ones that are most in need of your personal attention and positive coaching, and stay active with them and say, you are a nice girl, you are a nice boy, please keep in sport, but you have to set boundaries in their behavior, but still keep the positive coaching and act towards them as an individual and say you appreciate them.
Perfect. And Sophia, have you, in the context of the coach-athlete relationship really, and this idea of the continuum from coach-athlete-centered relationship really, have you, I know you've done a lot of work in getting coaches to improve their relationship. Have you done work as well making athletes aware of their relationship and their role in that relationship?
Yeah, that is a great point, Sergio, because the relationship is a dyadic phenomenon. It's a concept that two people share, and they have equal part in it. So the coach may try his or her hardest to develop good quality relationships with their athletes, but the athletes have got a role to play in that relationship. And the relationship is a skill. It's something that we can be taught to do well, or we can just let go, really, and have none of that. So the athletes have got a role to play, and they get much less guidance and support in developing and maintaining good quality relationships with their coaches, with their peers. And there is so much more space that needs to be covered in this particular area. We were very fortunate, to get a research grant from the Olympic Studies Center of the IOC, and we developed an online educational program that focuses on athletes, or we developed it with the athletes in mind, in order to raise their awareness about the role and significance of the coach-athlete relationship, and how and what they can do in order to make it successful and satisfying. But there is more to do, I think.
But it is fantastic, really, that you're both thinking really about that, as you say, is that a dyadic relationship is two ways, really. It's a two-way street, okay? And we need to make sure that we support in both the coaches and the athletes, really, to work together. Great. Next question was for both as well, around, and you've both talked a lot around the idea of being controlling or empowering. And David was asking around, because this is very typical of a youth sport, okay? The idea of rewards. How do we reward children, and whether rewards are a positive thing or a negative thing? So I don't know if any of you has a view on the use of rewards in children and youth sport. Who wants to take it?
Rewards for youth sport. Well, you see, it's about, if you look at empowering, it's about transferring control. So you give the child more and more control over their own behavior. You can have tokens if you want to. For small children, it will work. But the older children want to have contact with you and want to discuss with you. And the more you listen to them and give them also the feeling that they are listened to, that's also a reward. So it's also in the behavior that the rewards are there. And you can also make appointments that if they are always on time, you can do the warming up yourselves. Or you can have a drink afterwards with the whole team, because that also gives a belonging to a social group, and you do things together as a social group. So that's also appreciated by athletes. It's all about how they feel they are also in control of the interaction, and they have something to say. The more they feel safe, the more they feel respected, the more they will talk to you and say everything to you. So it's in, again, the relationship. How do you build a relationship? But I always think that's the main part starts with the coach, because he's the adult and he has to give the athlete the time and the freedom to grow into this relationship and feel there. And we also did research in dual career. And then you see that sometimes the athlete has to choose between school and between sports. If then the coach always says, no, sports is first. So what can the athlete control in that way? So you have to ask them, what's the big point now? How do we deal with that? So you talk to them. How do you, if there is a problem, how do you solve the problem? So it's about talking, communication, as Sophia said, and building this relationship of trust.
So that's interesting, that really there are rewards that don't have to necessarily be physical. You can reward people in different ways, in more psychological ways, really, that build the relationship. Sophia, any comments from you regarding this idea of rewards?
Yes, I was just exactly thinking, you can define rewards in many different ways. In my way, in the way that I understand, my area, it's very rewarding from the coaches and the athletes' point of view to have a relationship that is good. and satisfying. That is the most beautiful reward that the coach and athlete can have, knowing that, for example, from an athlete point of view, my coach has got the best interest at heart for me, and I know that he or she will help me achieve my personal goals. That is most rewarding. And equally for the coach to know that he or she has got an athlete who is really working well, and there is understanding, and there is a good communication, and talking about good quality relationships. I would also like to touch upon the point of mental health. The relationships not only touch performance and enjoyment and satisfaction, it is, it makes you feel good. There's this good feel factor that is most rewarding to have. You always want to go to that coach that really cares for you, and you also want to turn up for training as a coach to a team that really you have a connection with.
Thank you. And we're going to start with you. We're going to stay with you, Sophia, for a second, because there was another question from Liliana around, so you've talked about, on the one hand, being coach-centered, on the other side, being athlete-centered, and that's not good either, because it's too much the other way. And then the sweet spot in the middle of the coach-athlete-centered relationship. And Liliana was asking, well, is that not what we are already doing, that we move from one side to the other? So I was going to ask you, I mean, in your experience, are coaches good at this, or are we leaning towards one side or the other? Where are the car crashes in this?
Yes, that is a good observation from Liana, and thank you very much for the question. Yes, the coaches, good coaches, definitely do a little bit of both. They adjust and adapt and are very agile within their coaching environment. My point is really for those perhaps academics out there who we need a bit more clarification. And we need to, because coaching becomes more evidence-based, it is more evidence-based practice, we need to really be very clear with what we mean and what we transmit to practitioners. So that was for me to try to clarify to all of you, practitioners or not, what we mean with the terms, I guess, that we use. In real life, I agree. Most of the coaches try to do a little bit of both and adjust as the situation presents itself.
I mean, that's interesting, because the research that you mentioned before that I did with Cliff Mallet from Australia, with very successful coaches, that's what we found really, that these guys, we called it having cognitive and emotional flexibility to be able to move around that continuum really, and becoming a bit of a chameleon coach. What color do you need to be on a particular day or with a particular athlete, and change your color to suit the demands of the athlete. And I think that's the art of coaching. That's really tough, to have that mental awareness to be able to change and be so. You said being agile. I think that's a great word to describe it, and I think that's a hard thing to do. It's tough, yeah. and you're not going to get it right all the time.
No, that's yeah, and to be able as a coach to be agile and to be adaptable and flexible, what you really truly need is to know your athletes and understand your athletes. And the only way to know and understand your athletes is if you have that connection. If there is trust, if there is respect, if there is commitment, if there is cooperation, then you have what you need to make you very good in what you're doing.
Great. And I've got another question really, and this is an interesting one for you, Sophia. The question is for both, really. I'm going to ask you both. But it's actually from one of your former students, and he's actually a good friend of mine. He's also a basketball coach, Matthew Harbour, and he was a student of yours at Loughborough University. But Matthew's asking, okay, so in terms of the coach-athlete relationship or the pedagogical climate, the compass, do we need to do anything different for the new generations? How has it changed from the millennials to the generation X, Z, Y, whatever it is that we are on to now? What's your take on this? Do we need to change anything, or are there any specific characteristics of these new generations?
I think I will just provide a very short answer and hand to Nicolette to provide her answer. I would probably say we don't need to do anything different. We need to consider the fact that relationships is one basic psychological need that we all need to satisfy. And on that basis, relationships will always be important, whatever generation one might place themselves in. And that's my answer.
Thank you. I think I have to agree with that. Nicolette, over to you.
Well, if I look at the new generation, then you see a couple of things that they are very digital. Dus in the digital generation, I should say that a coach can use this in their coach practice because it fits with the generation. So you can give homework or act or communicate the digital way. So Corona can be of use to translate all the ICT probabilities into also the new way of coaching and use that with this new generation because it's theirs. And you see that the new generation also is more driven by different experience. So they will not stay in one sport, but they will follow more sports. So if you know that, then you have to see, can I make appointments with other clubs so we can interchange what we are doing or give them more sports that it's not one that they can try 4 different at the same time. So I'm looking at, because we see also in the Netherlands that the children in the 15-year-olds that run out of the sport clubs also get involved in other kinds of sport, like urban sports. They also find their own way in sports. So maybe we can use the way the urban sport is organized also within organized sport. And they are more looking at their owner. So they have, you give them, how do you say that, more control also how to run the sports club. So it's more about empowerment. So if you want to look at the generation, it's the digital experience and more transfer of control.
And that's really interesting because I mean I do feel that as a species we don't change in 20 years. We don't evolve in 20 years. I think deep down we all. And what teenagers need from us now is the same thing that I needed 30 years ago, and it's just maybe how we give it to them might change because of the communication channels might be different or the use of technology. But in the end, and you know, again, personal experience, but over the last 30 years of coaching, the 12, 13, 14, 15, 16-year-olds that I've coached haven't changed. To me, at the end of the day, they want the same things from you. But again, and I think there's research to prove that, but I'm just going to make clear that's my opinion of my own coaching. There was another really interesting question really from Simon, a good friend Simon from Northern Ireland, talking about whether there's any research or whether you've used the 4Cs model, Sophia, in relation to the coach-to-coach relationship within coaching teams.
Yes. Hi, Simon. Yeah, good question. And personally, we in our own research at Loughborough University, we haven't actually applied the 4Cs model on the coach-to-coach relationship. We have applied it in business between coach, executive coach and coachee relationship, and also in education between teachers and students. But I know colleagues from a different university in the UK have looked at the relationship between coach, head coach, and analyst, performance analyst relationship, using a different model. You may have heard the compass model, which is again a similar name as Nicolette's, but refers to the communication strategies that coaches and athletes utilize. So this has been transferred over in that coach performance analyst relationship. It is a good question. I don't see why we cannot transfer the basic principles of the model to any type of two-person relationship. So I think it will work well, and I think a lot of practitioners actually have used the 4Cs. I know coach developers in rowing and in other sports at the highest level of performance have used it to assess and evaluate the relationships between coaches and coaches.
Thank you. I mean, I've always felt since the first time I came across your model that it makes a lot of sense intuitively. I know it's based on research and it's got a lot of evidence behind it, but it really makes a lot of sense intuitive, and I would really encourage everybody to try it really. Final question for both of you. I'm going to go Nicolette first, and then I'll let you go back to your afternoon and your cold beer or ice cream in this wonderful weather. But there was a question around, okay, so we're talking about a number of ideas that we have accepted that they're not easy to do, okay? Even if they're intuitive or common sense, it's not always easy when you're standing in front of a bunch of 30 kids or or when you've got an elite athlete in front of you. But if we look at really at the, the volunteer coach, okay? Which elements of your two models would you emphasize to them really to focus on and you know, start making a difference really quickly? Nicolette, first going to you.
So if the question is that if a volunteer coach wants to start, where he starts?
Yeah, so in terms of a volunteer coach that perhaps doesn't have a high level qualification, maybe just done a level 1 or not even done a level 1, coaches 1 hour a week, and really the rest of the day is an accountant in a bank, or she's a teacher. Where would you how would you help them start getting a handle on the idea of the compass?
Well, in my point of view, he needs to start with being a nice coach. Just being a nice coach for children, have the guts to do the things differently than in your sport club, because we know there are a lot of top-down coaches within the voluntary clubs. They say we always done this and we do it so. So if you are coming there with your pedagogical compass, then you are going to pamper and we don't win anymore. So I said, but that's what we need to change. So the culture change also needs guts for people that do things differently. So we also say, do things differently than you see within your sport club. That is the old-fashioned way of coaching. So, but you can start with being a nice coach.
So be nice and dare to be different. I love that. I think I'm gonna get a tattoo with that here somewhere.
Yeah.
and Sophia, over to you.
Yes, I will say, I will echo what Nicolette just said. A nice coach is a good start for all coaches, regardless of whether they are volunteers, paid, senior, junior, whatever their grade might be or classification. You know, to be a nice coach, be a role model, like you said, Nicolette, is very important. And you're there to teach these young people. We have to remind ourselves, and relationships is a skill for life, and it is important that we teach our youngsters how to develop those interpersonal and social skills. And it doesn't take too much, believe me, it doesn't take too much. Maybe a handshake will be a good start, a pat on the back, a look of well done, or of acknowledgement, and showing a little bit of interest. If I were to pick one of the 4 C's, since we have a discussion around the 4 C's, I would say closeness will be the one to focus on. Trust, respect, appreciation, such important values to have and to hold. So coaches out there, try to develop those to your athletes. That'll be a good step in the right direction.
That's fantastic. We have a bit of a mantra that we use all the time that we say, build relationships before you build skills. And also connection before correction, and I think that I mean as something to take away, you know, what you just said about being nice. I know, you know, all 3 of us do a lot of work, research, and you guys are professors and all that, hundreds of papers, but in the end it starts with being nice. Okay, it's not that complex. We can build a lot on top of that, but the first step is really clear. Look, I'm gonna let you go. It's amazing because we have great speakers, but also we have incredible people in the audience. I'm just gonna give you an example. So we also have Diane Colbert, a fantastic researcher in sports coaching, and Diane was actually giving us an example around in one of her first interviews, research interviews years ago. The coach said to her, "Well, I have to make sure that they have fun, because if they don't come back, I don't have a job." So we need to make sure that they come back. That's another takeaway. Okay. Nicolette, Sophia, I'm sure that everybody will join me in thanking you for your presentations today and for your knowledge and for being nice. Okay. Again, thank you everybody for attending. Please let the webinar will be on YouTube as of tomorrow. Share with people, bring more people into the iCoachKids family, and let's keep growing this movement. Again, Sophia, Nicolette, thank you so much. Everybody else, have a great afternoon, evening, or whatever it is for you, and see you soon. Thank you, everybody.